This is Walt Disney World Today. Give us 5 minutes and we'll give you the world.
It's Friday, September 15th, 2006, and this is episode number 153 of Walt Disney World Today. It's also our 1-year anniversary, so yay us. Super.
What'd you get us?
Well, it's a glorious 3-hour finale.
It's a glorious 3-hour finale.
I'm Matt Hochberg from Matt.
It's going to be one of those shows, I can tell right now.
Now you've got 3 seconds.
You got a minute and a half.
I'm Matt Hochberg from mgmstudios.org and also somewhere in Walt Disney World right now. Nothing says Walt Disney World Today podcast, though, like Len Testa of the Unofficial Guide to Walt Disney World. Welcome, Len.
How's it going, Matt?
Outstanding. And Mouse Planet's bad boy is here, Mike Scopa of mouseplanet.com. I maintained myself while saying
he
that.
writes in leather underwear. Go ahead.
Well, hello. As you can see,
You're going to play it straight. I knew it.
Well, hello, Matt. As you can see, I used my shrinking machine to not only shrink my size, but also my personal hoverpod. Now, I get 22 miles to the teaspoon. Whoa, watch out. Those blades are sharp.
Thanks, Professor. And we have my main man, Mike Newell of Mouse World Radio here. Welcome, Mike.
Hey, it's been a glorious year of outstanding.
And also on the show is our special guest, Sam Genoway of EDAW, which is online at www.edaw.com. And EDAW, of course, is one of the largest landscape architecture and designing firms in the world. And Sam has worked on almost 40 projects around the world, including some at Walt Disney World. Welcome back, Sam.
Well, hello, and greetings from Pasadena, California, home of the Tournament of Roses Parade, the Rose Bowl, and the hometown of Van Halen.
Yeah.
That's right, Pasadena, baby.
Rock on.
Now I know how he gets back on this show. He just sweet talks Len. Oh.
It was David Lee Roth who once said. That's how I'm going to get the Van Halen quote in the book. I'm going to refer to him as American philosopher D.L. Roth. I'm going to come up with some wacky quote that he said. I'm going to try and tie it into like Coronado Springs or something.
Well, today we're talking to Sam again. Sam first appeared back in episode 108, and it was so interesting that we brought Sam back to talk more about urban design principles that are utilized in Walt Disney World. So where do you want to start tonight, Sam?
Well, I think we should finish up with the Magic Kingdom. I can kind of quickly run through some of the major urban design concepts that are the organizing principles that make some of those areas work, and one particular area where it doesn't quite actually come together. That might be a great place to start. How's that sound to you?
That sounds great. And just to recap for some of our listeners who may not have heard episode 108, if you haven't, it's probably best to go back and download episode 108 in our podcast archives at www.today.com. As Sam explains a lot of these things to begin with for a lot of novices, and now he's just kind of like continuing on as if episode 108 was still going. So it might be, if you haven't listened to it, you might want to go back. But Sam, go ahead.
Well, a lot of these ideas and stuff are designed in a way that when you go to the park, you're going to see the park through a fresh pair of eyes, and you might be looking for things you otherwise might not. So let's take an example. Let's go into the Magic Kingdom. I think we talked the last time about Main Street and the entrance and the castle. We talked about this concept that Walt Disney had come up with, which is called the weenie, which in planning circles is known as a view terminus, which is that you create a visual corridor that has a significant object at the very end. The purpose of that is to draw people into the land. So when you walk on Main Street, the first obvious weenie is and you want to go to Cinderella Castle, it's big, it's there, and that takes you into the hub, which is like a bicycle tire. There's a hub, and then it spokes out into different lands. The weenie is designed to attract you to the various lands. So while you're standing there and you're looking into Tomorrowland, Tomorrowland's all about kinetics. It's all about movement. It was based on the 1967 version of Disneyland's Tomorrowland, which was known as the World of Motion, and you've got the People Mover, the TTA, I guess it's called, in Walt Disney World.
That's fantastic. I'd never noticed that before. Because it's got the Astro Orbiter moving around, it's got the little spinny things. It's all about
it's all about motion, and it's got motion at various levels too. You've got motion high up with the Astro Orbiter. You've got it a little bit lower with the People Mover TTA. You've got, of course, the people. You've got the kinetics of their entrance gateway, and then if you go a little step further, Autopia's in Tomorrowland. You've got motion with Autopia. you've got motion with the train going through, and at one point in time you also have motion with the submarines, but of course the submarines aren't there anymore. So the idea of that is kinetic energy and its motion, and in its original form it was supposed to be the world of tomorrow based on transportation systems. As it evolved into this landing port that it's become now, where Tomorrowland has given way to becoming Pixar Land, and I'm not exactly sure what part of tomorrow is left in there.
Whole other
Sorry
show.
about that. Just pet peeve there, but it's about.
You're right. I mean,
kinetics,
the motion is so it's so out there and visual and prominent. I've been to Tomorrowland hundreds of times. I've never thought about it that way before. That is awesome.
Yeah. Very good. So that's Tomorrowland. It's about kinetics. So the weenie there is the Astro Orbiter. It's really effective. It's high. It's up there. It attracts you. It moves you into the place. That at least gets you into the center. Once you're at the center, you can decide to go to the Carousel of Progress. Once again, that's motion. That's kinetic. It's a building that's moving. You've got Space Mountain's entrance, and then you've got the place where the arcade is. So that would be Tomorrowland. It's about motion. It's about kinetics. That's what draws you in. It's supposed to be organized under this idea that it's a landing port where space aliens and humans sort of interact with each other. So that's supposed to be the underlying backstory or the underlying theme that ties the whole area together. And it's evolving now, with Stitch's Great Escape and the Monsters Lab, and Buzz Lightyear is sort of evolving into something that's not exactly Tomorrowland, but that's also one of the biggest problems Imagineers have had over the years is how do you create the world of the future without the world of the future catching up to you?
Right.
I mean, the original Disneyland, Tomorrowland, was based on the future of 1986. It didn't turn out anything like that at all. And so they kind of
They didn't mention Van Halen for one thing. I mean, come on.
There you go. They kind of gave up, and they've taken advantage of what they learned for Disneyland Paris and creating sort of a place that doesn't have any sort of time to it, so they don't have to keep reinventing it. So then we keep turning around. We go to the next land from there, which would be Mickey's Toontown Fair, which was originally, as I understand, designed to be a temporary thing for Mickey Mouse's birthday.
Right.
And the idea caught on, and they decided to keep it. And I'd have to say this is the one area of the Magic Kingdom I'm very critical of. And I can only compare it to the Toontown here at Disneyland California, which I visit an awful lot, into Geeksville there. If you come to the California Toontown, it's a really clever representation of what cities really are about. It starts with an industrial area where the trolley comes out of, and where there's the Roger Rabbit ride, and there's some industrial storage areas. And then you get kind of in the commercial business district with the Emporium and the mail house, or the post office and stuff. And then it goes into the Civic Center area where it has a little city hall. And one of my favorite things, which is a sign for the Planning Commission, which they didn't leave enough room, and it's compacted. And then you go where a gas station and transition into the suburbs. Well, that's Disneyland California, and the organizing principle is very solid and hangs the whole area together, I think, very tightly. I was really disappointed when I went to Mickey's Toontown Fair, because you can kind of tell it was, we're going to put some tents so that you can always find the characters, and then we're going to add on a couple of other things. We're going to add on a couple of houses, and I don't understand, and maybe a listener can write me and let me know, I don't understand exactly how that area is organized. The backstory to it is that the fair came to town, and it's a place where the Toon characters can vacation, because they actually live here in California and live in Anaheim. But they go there to vacation, and they have their summer houses. But it's not very tied together very well. The gateway isn't very distinctive. It's just sort of a sign. So that area I've never really quite understood, and don't necessarily spend a lot of time, and maybe that's why I don't understand it, although I do spend a lot of time in Toontown, California.
I didn't think there really was a backstory to it. I thought it was sort of like, this is where they live, and that was...
my understanding
is
that
there is a backstory,
was
it's really not... It's not
yeah, because the Anaheim one is a very clean story. The Anaheim story is Mickey Mouse and the rest of the Toons used to live in town, and when Walt wanted to build his theme park, he asked Mickey, and Mickey said, hey, why don't you open it up right next door to us? And that's when Disneyland was open, and then at some point the Toon characters thought comfortable enough about humans that they let humans come underneath the railroad track and be able to visit them, and that's why you're living in their city, and that their city, as far as architecture is, that's probably the most clever thing about Toontown Fair.
No right angles, baby.
That's right, no right angles. It's all about squish and squash. That uses a lot of animation techniques to try to create distinctive buildings that seem very Toon-like. What's fascinating, though, is if you look at most cartoons, especially Walt Disney cartoons, the idea of the plausible impossible is that the background should look so realistic that if a deer's talking, you can believe a deer can talk because the backgrounds are so realistic. And if you look at most Disney cartoons, the backgrounds are fairly straightforward, and the cartoon characters are a little weird. In this particular case, the people are normal, and the backgrounds have to be more Toony-like. So they use squish and squash. They compress things. They expand things just like cartoon characters. They use a lot of different tools and techniques. If anybody has the book, The Art of Animation, and you look at the front page of The Art of Animation, there's a listing of cartoon tools and techniques, and you walk through Toontown Fair, you're going to see a lot of them represented there.
Is that the one by Christopher... The big white
There's a guy named Christopher Alexander. He wrote a book called A Pattern Language.
No. There's the white. It's like the Art of Disney book. Is that
yeah, that they just recently republished, I think.
Yeah. That's it.
It's been around a long time. There's also a great book by Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnson about the development of animation, being two of the great 9 old men, that I found is a real good resource as far as understanding the architecture of Toontown as well. So that would be Toontown. And then as we move and we're standing in the hub, and of course Toontown's not connected to the hub. You can't find it unless you're on the train or you sort of wander your way back there. The next land that's established from the hub, of course, is Fantasyland. And in Fantasyland, of course, you've got the grandest weenie of them all, the 189-foot tall Cinderella Castle. But what's really important there is it's not just the castle, but what really sucks you in is what's known as a deflected view, and that is you stand in the hub and you look up. First of all, the entrance to the castle is elevated, and then there's the archway, and what the first thing you see beyond the archway is the carousel. And the carousel is, once again, movement, and like all these things, movement attracts people, just like color attracts people, and the movement of the carousel makes you want to walk up to the castle. But unlike Disneyland, you can't just go straight through the castle across the moat. You have to go up these ramps on the side,
right,
and that deflects your view, and then when you walk in, it sucks you, and you're just that much closer. So it's a very clever use of deflected view to a view terminus. Let me explain how that works in the real world. There's an architect named John Jurdy who has reinvented the concept of shopping malls. He did City Walk in Universal Studios California, Horton Plaza in San Diego, and numerous malls. He's the guy who really got into the idea that if you want to really intrigue people, you need to deflect the view. It shouldn't be just obvious where you're going next. You've got to have to peer around a corner and then be surprised. And the Fantasyland does that very well, especially the entrance to it. Once you get beyond the castle, the land itself really kind of flattens out. It becomes a big, broad area. And I think what really fascinates me for that land is color. The use of color to establish story and textures. The pavement changes. The buildings change. There's a lot of color.
That's
and
right.
A lot of that's... Pardon me?
Yeah, because you go from, figure on the side of Pooh, you start off with sort of German, sort of, what is Pooh's, like, you've got the carousel, you've got the sort of old world European.
You've got a lot of there's a lot of use and influence from the color palette of Ivan Durrell, who is the background designer for the movie Sleeping Beauty.
Right.
And just like the old version of Fantasyland in California, it's based on looking like a tournament with the tournament shields and the flags. And the colors are these very vibrant, very 50s kind of colors that Ivan Durrell was quite famous for. And it really uses color to create kind of an energy about the place as well. And then, of course, the textures. The sidewalks aren't just pavement, but they use like stone pavers and things that are like that. As you get closer to Liberty Square, so over by Pan and everything, you sort of transition to a different architecture, right? That's right. I would say that Liberty Square, they're the weenie. When you look towards Liberty Square, they use the same thing that they use in Frontierland in California, which is the Liberty Bell, right? That's the name of the ship there. The Liberty Bell, the steamship, is the weenie that attracts you. You should be able to see the steamship. The landing station is a tall tower as well. And that's what attracts you to that land. That area is a lot different than any other place really in the Magic Kingdom. It's a very unique, because first of all, it's an urban environment as opposed to the more suburban areas the other lands are. It's a very urban environment. It's very compact. there aren't a lot of views outside of the land. You really are pretty well contained within the land itself. There are a lot of little windy streets, much like New Orleans Square. In fact, I think the success of Liberty Square was the predecessor to the World Showcase at Epcot, where they're able to take these relatively urban environments and suck you in so you don't see the rest of the world. You can be completely immersed in that particular theme. And Liberty Square, I think, does that very, very well and has some wonderful transitional areas. There's these couple of tunnels that you walk under, especially from Fantasyland into Liberty Square, where it's themed sort of Fantasyland on one side. You walk underneath, the music changes, the look changes, and the building represents a more urban environment of the Revolutionary War period of the United States. The only real vista outside of Liberty Square is looking down through Frontierland. And I don't think I talked about this the last time, but the story of America is told through the architecture of both Liberty Square and Frontierland, where it starts in the Hudson Valley in the early 1700s with the Haunted Mansion. And then we move to Boston, south a little bit, or we move to Boston area where the Columbia House is. And then you get a little later into the Revolutionary War period and more of a Philadelphia-type architecture with the Hall of Presidents. And then you move to antebellum architecture of the South of that period when you move towards when you end up moving towards the I'm going to call it the Golden Horseshoe. It's the Diamond Horseshoe, right? The Golden Horseshoe. Sorry, you have to forgive me. I've been to Disneyland like hundreds of times. I've been to Walt Disney World like 4 times. And then that's the kickoff of the next part of our story, that the Diamond Horseshoe is based on a saloon from about the 1820s in St. Louis, which, for those who are into history, St. Louis was the furthest reaches of the western frontier before you stepped off the face of the earth.
End of the line, baby.
That's right, and that's where our adventure in Frontierland starts. It starts in 1820s St. Louis, and then it moves its way across the country, and it moves its way across time until we get the closure of the frontier with the railroad track, and we've even gone beyond the frontier because
is that what the railroad means there? Is that that's what the railroad means? The closure of the frontier?
It's the closure of the frontier. That you've got the point. The frontier is now closed. You've got the train. You've now visited the South with Splash Mountain, and by the time you get beyond where the train and the closure of the West is, you're in Big Thunder Mountain, which is really a ghost town. It means we're post the frontier.
I will never look at that transition again the same way. That's fantastic, and that's the last attraction in Frontierland. If you walk that way.
That's right.
It's almost like they planned it that way.
and that's the clever thing is that I'm fascinated by these theme parks because they are, in real city planning, our major function is first function and then aesthetics. I mean, that's really what it should be. It should function and it should be beautiful. But it's different in a theme park. In a theme park, you're trying to utilize the architecture and the landscaping to tell you a story and to involve you into a story and to allow you to suspend your disbelief and become part of that story and not worry about the troubles of the real world, but to start thinking, I'm walking down in Frontierland. Also, Frontierland is unique in the sense that it's one of the only places that I've seen in Magic Kingdom that has multiple paths to give you different experiences. So you can, for instance, walk right up against the Frontierland building on the little wooden sidewalks and feel like a cowboy, or you can walk in what's normally the parade route area and get a nice vista of it, but you can't really see Tom Sawyer Island from there because there's that alley of trees. And then if you want to be really out in the frontier, you can walk along the boardwalk and watch Tom Sawyer Island.
Yeah.
And they even use the Liberty Bell as an aesthetic device to tie in the Revolutionary War colonial period to Frontierland by using the Liberty Bell as the ship that takes you through time from one portion to the other portion of the river. So it's really clever stuff. These understories, I think they really add something to the experience. You can dive into it a bit deeper and become more part of the story when you've learned what the backstory are for each of these different lands and their organizing principles.
Well, just to understand that there is a backstory, I think we all appreciate, the Disney theme park planning. I had no idea that someone had actually sat down and thought all of that out in terms of the frontier, starting in the extreme end of Fantasyland all the way through to Big Thunder.
Oh, they're even geekier than that too. The next time you're in Frontierland, you'll notice they've even put dates on the buildings, and the dates
Yeah,
are
those are in Chronicle.
sequential.
Yeah.
So,
That's amazing.
So that would be Frontierland. Where
Wow.
else do you want to go?
I think that's probably it for this show. We're out on time, guys.
Yes, Sam, please.
Well,
Yes.
I always enjoy this. This is
Man,
great.
that was
Love the podcast.
amazing.
Sam, of course, is from EDAW, which is located online at edaw.com. And Sam, I'm sure we're going to have you back because we got to finish at least the Magic Kingdom. Maybe we'll get to another park. But there's just so much out there. And, again, very interesting information. So, Sam, thank you for coming on.
Very good. My pleasure.
And that's it for us today. If you want to find older episodes, read our show notes, or send us your comments, visit the Walt Disney World Today website at wdwtoday.com. You can also email us at questions@wdwtoday.com. For Len Testa, Mike Scopa, Mike Newell, and Sam Janaway, I'm Matt Hochberg. We'll see you on the next show.